Guys, today we're gonna finally put this 1356 Borg Warner transfer case back together. We've got the parts for it, but we've been busy working on a couple other projects here, so just getting everything cleaned up. If you remember, we had a broken shift fork, oil pump was bad, the bracket that holds it in place in the case was beat right up. So we've got everything here, new pump kit, new bracket there. You can see what it's supposed to look like compared to what it did look like. All these parts came from Rigid Axle down in the States, and I was able to get everything I needed from them one foul swoop, and pretty happy about that. So we got new speedometer gear, which is worn out, new bushing, got our new arm, and as you can see, it actually came with plastic shims installed on there to hold it in place. Seals in the gasket that we need, bearings, and another set of those little plastic shims for the shift forks there, which we'll use one set of yet. So we're just got half the case cleaned up here, and we're going to, this is the half that we did the little repair on for where the pump sits. And if you watched the last video, it was just a bolt that we put through, drilled a hole, stuck a bolt through with some silicone on it, ground it down to fit the pump. And we're going to see when we put the new pump in there if we have to do any more cleaning up on that to make it fit just right. But that bolt head will be a great solid spot for that pump bracket to ride on, so this doesn't fail again. Alright, we got the new bearings in, snap rings. We'll throw the seals in when we're done. Next thing we're going to do here is clean up the rest of the parts. We decided not to get a new chain on this one. There just doesn't seem to be enough wear on it to worry about. So we're going to clean up the planetary, the chains, these shafts, get this old pump off here, and get everything ready to go, and we'll show you how we put her back together. Alright guys, dropped in the outer planetary gear and the planetary. Put that snap ring in here and dropping this guy in. And now we're just going to install the new pump here to start taking this off. This is that pump bracket that's wrecked, and the hose that was busted off there on the pump. So we got the new pump kit here. We're going to install that next and then get the main shaft in. Great, we get the pump installed. Just keep an eye on the bracket is opposite of the suction line, and these lips are on the outside, not the inside, so everything goes together nicely. Torque those bolts up nice and even, make sure everything rotates nice, which it does, and she's good to go. I'll get that shaft installed now and continue on with the rebuild. And as you can see, where we've done the repair on the transfer case there, that pump bracket is sitting nicely against that, so that's going to create a nice spot for preventing the wear. It sits in there nice, and that was our main fix on this guy, short of a few other issues that no pumping oil caused, which we're repairing as we go as well. And as always, we got a helper here today. It's just always in the way. Alright, we got the shift forks in, the clutch gear, and the rod in here. So let's make sure it gets down into the case there. And then the spring sits over top here. When you put the case together, make sure that all lines up nicely. Alright, we got the shaft in that changes the gears and engages the four-wheel drive. The chain is on, and the other drive sprocket there, or driven sprocket, I guess. And we're going to turn our attention now to the other half of the case get this cleaned up. This is where the clutch coil is. Get this cleaned up and get that case back together. Silicone was used last time, but I'd rather use anaerobic compound for these instead of silicone, so we'll get that cleaned up and put it together with some anaerobic compound and get her filled up with oil, get everything rotating, and we'll work at getting that Bronco back in here and get it installed again. Another little project we're working on is this little escape that we picked up at an auction. Needs some instrument cluster work, and it's got a bit of a draw on the battery here. We're just working on that now. We'll see if it goes away, but we're still reading 170, 180 milliamps. Should be 50 milliamps or less. We just towed this thing back here today, and it's in fairly decent shape. Doesn't need a whole bunch of work, and nice little car. We picked it up cheap, so that'll be something else we'll be toying with here as well. One last thing too before we put the cases together is we get that pump line on in there. Make sure you get that clamp in, and good clearance there with the chain, the filter in place, and then you got this little magnet that has to sit down in there, and that's what holds the filter down where it should be, so avoid contact with the chain, and also collects any little bit of debris that might come off when it starts to wear a little bit. Alright, we've got the case halves back together using that anaerobic compound. You can see the red squishing out. Snap ring on that shaft there, holding that together. And get that snap ring back in there, that one that causes so much trouble. We'll get these bolts torqued up, and then we'll show you how to put the speedometer gear on. Okay guys, case bolts are all in, nice and tight. You can see the anaerobic compound comes out. The reason you can get away with that over silicone is those are machined surfaces, and that's all you need to seal it up. You don't need silicone. It just makes it harder to take apart. Next thing we'll be putting on is a spacer for the speedometer gear, and then the speedometer gear, which is new, that has that slot right there, and that ball bearing sits in that shaft divot there to keep it from turning. And that's the last piece of the puzzle. Then we'll be putting on the cover and putting the seals in. So make sure you clean up those seal surfaces really well. This one is just a little bit pitted, but getting the rust and everything off, make it as smooth as you can, will hopefully help prevent that from leaking. We'll have to keep an eye on this one once we get it together and make sure it's not got a drip, but I think it'll be okay. Okay guys, we got a couple different kinds of seals here. This seal we don't use. It would be on the output shaft if you had a sliding yoke on the drive shaft that slid in there. We don't have that style. We have the ones that are bolted in, and all three seals are the same for the front input, the front output, and the rear output. Something I like to do, take a little bit of grease and put around on the spring on the back side of that seal, and that helps it keep that spring in place when you're tapping the seal in, and also make sure you get a little bit of grease on the seal surface where it's going to ride against these shafts. Keep everything lubricated and stop it from getting hot on the first time it starts to rotate. Alright, got the first one in there. Seal went in nice, yoke went in good. Unfortunately our kit only came with 2 of these little oil seals, so we're going to be reusing the one. We'll get that cleaned up, but don't forget to slide these guys in before you put the nut on and the washer. You got to have that guy in there, you're going to have a leak on your thread.